I wasn't even supposed to be home that night. That's what I keep replaying in my head. The only reason I came back early was because the umbrella I bought from a gas station for $6 flipped inside out in the wind. I stood on the sidewalk like an idiot, soaked and shivering, staring at that cheap plastic skeleton in my hand. Felt like a metaphor for everything. And I turned around and walked home. My name's Wallace. I'm 42. I live in a sleepy part of Ohio where not much happens. And when it does, people pretend it didn't. I work in IT for a small law firm. Not glamorous, not exciting, just stable. That was the word my wife used to describe me to her friends once. Wallace is stable, like a wooden fence, like a chair that doesn't wobble, dependable, dull. My wife's name is Karen. We've been married for 11 years. We met at a job fair of all places. She said I had kind eyes and offered me a breath mint before I even said hello. That tiny moment felt like the beginning of something perfect. And now here I am, retelling the beginning while quietly watching the end unfold. When I came home early that night, I wasn't expecting anything unusual. I was drenched, annoyed, and in desperate need of dry socks. But as I fumbled with the key in the front door, I heard something that stopped me. Voices, laughter, a man's voice, not loud, low like a whisper you weren't meant to hear. I stepped in quietly. The hallway was dim. The air smelled like her perfume. Vanilla, lavender, and something I could never name. I heard her giggle, then silence, then hurried footsteps, like someone moving fast across hardwood floors. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds before calling out, "Karen," no answer at first. Then from the living room came her voice, too cheerful, too forced. "Hey babe, you're back early." There was only one glass on the table, one wine glass, and it was still half full. No sign of anyone else. No coat by the door. Nothing. Just her, curled up on the couch in her robe like she'd been alone the whole time. I didn't ask questions. Not that night. I just nodded and told her I got soaked. And she smiled and said, "Poor thing." As if nothing had happened. But something had. I could feel it in my teeth. I didn't sleep well after that. The next morning, I checked our security app. She had disabled the front door cam for privacy a week ago. I never thought twice about it until then. Her explanation? Something about needing space to feel like the house wasn't always watching her. So I let it go like I always did. I wish I could say that was the moment I started investigating, that I took action, but I didn't. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being insecure. But things kept stacking up. Texts she never let me see. Her phone now always on silent, face down, never far from her hand. She started wearing perfume to go to the pharmacy, dressing up to return library books. Still, I did nothing, said nothing until last Saturday. We were getting ready for dinner with my sister and her husband. Karen looked stunning in a simple black dress I hadn't seen before. I told her she looked beautiful. She barely reacted. When I stepped out of the room, I heard her phone buzz behind me. I don't know why I looked. I shouldn't have, but I did. The message preview read, 8 p.m. sharp. Same table. Can't wait to see that smile again. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. My heart didn't break. It just compressed. Like something heavy had been slowly sitting on my chest for months, and I'd only just realized it. Still, I didn't confront her. I played it cool, said my stomach hurt, told her I'd stay home and rest, and she should go without me. She hesitated, then smiled. That nervous little smile people make when they think they've gotten away with something. She left at 7:20. I followed her. That part still feels surreal. Meet Wallace, the stable guy, creeping behind his wife's car through sleepy streets, heart pounding like a teenager sneaking out. She didn't go to my sister's. She didn't even hesitate. She went to a little Italian place downtown, a place I'd taken her to once on our 5th anniversary. She walked in like she'd done it 100 times. I waited 30 minutes. Then I sent her a text. "Good luck on your date." I watched through the restaurant window as she read it. The panic on her face said everything. And for once, I didn't feel like the dull, dependable one. I felt like I was finally seeing the truth, unfiltered, raw, and right in front of me. I didn't go home that night, After sending the message and watching her reaction through the foggy glass of the restaurant window, I walked away. Not far, just far enough to catch my breath, which felt like it had been stuck in my throat for months. She didn't come out right away. She just sat there, frozen, phone in her hand, eyes wide, then slowly scanned the room, probably wondering if I was already inside. I wasn't. I didn't need to be. The look on her face was more than enough. What's funny is the guy she was meeting, he didn't even notice at first. He just kept talking, gesturing like some confident movie extra trying to impress her. It took him almost a full minute to realize she wasn't listening. I watched from behind a parked SUV across the street. Hidden, quiet, not entirely sure what I was doing, but knowing I wasn't going to make a scene. That's never been my style. At 8:12 p.m., she rushed out of the restaurant with her phone clutched in one hand and her purse swinging wildly from her shoulder. She looked around like a hunted animal. I was already 2 blocks away by then, walking with no direction in mind, just letting my feet carry me into the night. I ended up in front of a 24-hour laundromat I used to go to before we got the fancy in-unit washer. I sat on a cold metal bench outside and watched the dryer spin while memories of better times spun in my head. Our wedding night, our first apartment, the way she used to dance barefoot in the kitchen while pasta boiled on the stove. Where did that version of her go? It's not like I was perfect. I know that. I work long hours. I don't always notice the little things. I've gained weight. I wear the same 5 shirts on rotation, but I was loyal. I was honest. I never once looked at another woman and thought, maybe I could do better. That night, I stayed at a cheap motel off Route 17. I didn't tell her where I was. I didn't answer her calls or her texts. She left 6 voicemails. The first 2 sounded angry. The next 3 were defensive. The 6th was her crying. I played it once, never again. The next morning, I went home. She was waiting in the kitchen wearing one of my old college hoodies, probably hoping it would make her look smaller, more innocent. She had a mug of coffee in both hands like it was some kind of shield. I didn't say anything at first, just set my bag down and looked at her. I can explain, she finally whispered. No, Karen, I said calmly. You can't. She blinked. I think she expected yelling, demands, rage. But I gave her none of that. I just sat down and asked the one question that had been burning in my chest since last night. How long? She bit her lip. That was her tell. Always had been. She does it when she's cornered, when she's about to lie or tell a half-truth and pretend it's the whole picture. Wallace, she started. But I cut her off. I'm not stupid. Please don't insult me. A long pause. Then she finally said it. For months. That was longer than I expected. That wasn't a mistake. That was a season. That was a whole chapter of her life she lived while I was still writing the last page of our last vacation. Who is he? She hesitated. Just someone from the gym. I let out a bitter laugh. Of course, it's the gym. I pay for your membership so you can meet someone who probably doesn't even know how to spell commitment. That hit her. I saw it in her shoulders. But I didn't feel proud of it. I didn't want to break her. I just wanted her to be honest. She didn't cry. Not yet. She just stood there, arms crossed now, starting to put her walls up. I didn't plan for this to happen. I didn't feel seen anymore. You don't ask about my day. You don't look at me the way you used to. That's when I finally said something I hadn't planned to say. I noticed everything, Karen. I just thought you were tired. I thought maybe you were depressed. I thought if I gave you space, you'd find your way back to me. But you weren't drifting. You were running. Her face twitched like she wanted to argue but couldn't because it was true. I got up, grabbed my keys, and opened the door. Where are you going? She asked. I don't know, I said honestly. But I can't stay here. Not right now. And then I left her standing there in our kitchen, barefoot and quiet, surrounded by things we both built together and now might have to divide. I spent the next few days at a rundown Airbnb above a nail salon. The heater made clicking sounds like it was trying to breathe, and the mattress had a dip in the center that forced you to sleep like you were clinging to the edge of a cliff. I barely slept anyway. I lived on gas station sandwiches, old text threads, and unanswered questions. The place smelled like acetone from downstairs and despair from upstairs. I told no one where I was, not my sister, not my coworkers, and definitely not Karen. She sent a few texts, nothing dramatic, just attempts to reach out like a neighbor checking on a noise complaint. "Are you okay? Please come home so we can talk." I stared at them without responding. She didn't call again. And for some reason, that made it worse. Like even she knew this wasn't something you could fix with a phone call. I replayed everything in my head. Every interaction over the past 6 months. Every shift in tone. Every fake excuse. She used to be so affectionate. She'd rub the back of my neck while I watched TV, kiss my temple while I read in bed. Somewhere along the line, that all disappeared. And I convinced myself we were just getting comfortable. But she wasn't settling in. She was pulling away, quietly, skillfully, like someone inching open a window before slipping out forever. One afternoon, I opened my laptop and scrolled through our bank account. I never checked it too deeply before. I handled the mortgage. She handled groceries and bills. But now I was staring at transfers I didn't recognize. Uber rides to parts of town we didn't live near. Charges at restaurants I'd never heard of. One entry, $1,270 for something labeled Sparrow and Ash. Sounded like a boutique hotel. I Googled it. Of course it was. Of course it had minimalist design, elevated privacy, and mood lighting built into the bed frame. I stared at the screen until it blurred. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just closed the laptop and whispered to no one, "What the hell happened to us?" That night I had a dream. One of those two real ones where she was sitting beside me just like old times, laughing about something small, the kind of laugh that comes with no pressure behind it. I reached out and touched her hand in the dream and woke up holding a pillow. The quiet was unbearable. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called Everett my closest friend growing up. We hadn't talked in over a year, not since a dumb argument over fantasy football. He picked up on the second ring and said, "Wallace, what's wrong?" Like he knew, like he always knew. I told him everything, not in a dramatic way, not looking for validation, just facts. I laid them out like evidence at a trial. The messages, the lies, the restaurant. He listened quietly, then said something that stuck with me. "Man, I wish I could tell you this is rare. But what's rare is someone who admits it hurts. That hit deeper than anything Karen ever said." He offered to let me crash at his place, but I declined. I wasn't ready to be around people, not even someone who knew me before I learned to second-guess everything. Instead, I spent that night in my car outside the house we used to call home. Lights were on. Her shadow moved through the kitchen. She was alone. Or maybe she wasn't. I didn't go check. I wasn't there to spy. I was there to see if I felt anything. I didn't. Not love, not hate, just hollow acceptance. Like watching a tree you planted get struck by lightning from far away. You don't scream. You just stand there and listen to the crack. Then you wait for silence. When I finally drove off, I left a note in the mailbox. No threats, no anger. Just 4 words written in ink that bled slightly from the cold. "You broke your home." 3 days after I left the note in the mailbox, I got a text from her that said, "You were here." That was it. No apology, no explanation, just the distant, uneasy tone of someone who realized they'd been watched through a window they thought was closed. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. The truth was already in motion, like a bottle drifting down river, too far to catch, too obvious to ignore. I moved into a long-stay hotel out near the bypass. It was quiet, impersonal, beige in every direction. The kind of place that doesn't expect conversation or eye contact. I worked remotely, ate alone, thought too much. But the silence was cleaner than the silence I'd had at home. The kind where you both know something's wrong, but pretend it's fine so you can get through dinner without crying into your mashed potatoes. On the 4th night, I drove to the storage unit. I still had the key from back when we renovated the upstairs bathroom and needed space. I don't know what I was hoping to find there. Maybe some forgotten piece of happiness we'd packed away before things turned sour. Instead, I found a dusty box labeled W's Old Stuff. I dragged it out and opened it in the back seat of my car with a flashlight between my knees. Inside were things I hadn't seen in years. A Valentine's Day card she wrote me during our second year of dating. A photo stripped from a booth at the zoo where we made silly faces and she kissed my cheek in the last frame. A burned CD labeled, "For Wallace. Long drives." I remembered that drive. It was just after my mom's funeral. We drove up the coast for hours without speaking. That music kept us together when words couldn't. Now it felt like I was touching artifacts from a dead culture. Somewhere near the bottom of the box was an old flip phone. Hers from before we upgraded. The battery was dead, but I had a charger in my trunk from an old electronics bin. I don't know why I plugged it in. Curiosity, self-harm, something in between. When it powered on, I started scrolling through the texts, not expecting much. It was mostly junk. Grocery lists, reminders, a few sweet messages from me, which she apparently never deleted. But then I found a name I didn't recognize. Denton. It wasn't the guy from the restaurant. His name was Ian. I'd seen it once in her phone under some random emoji, but Denton. These texts were older. 2 years ago, to be exact. There weren't many, but they were suggestive, just enough to make the hair on my arms rise. Still thinking about last weekend. He's clueless. Wish I could wake up beside you again. That last one was sent on our anniversary. I sat in the car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't one guy, one night. This was a pattern. This was her real life, and I'd just been the reliable background noise. A foundation she stood on while building secret rooms I never had keys to. That realization changed something fundamental in me. I wasn't just hurt. I wasn't even angry. I was numb. Numb in the way a building feels after the electricity has been cut. No light, no heat, just structure. I didn't sleep that night. I just drove around the city with that stupid CD playing in the background, hearing her voice and old lyrics she once sang aloud. I drove past the restaurant, past the hotel, past the gym where she met him. I even drove past our house. Her car wasn't there. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I just kept driving until I reached the edge of town where the road turned to gravel and the fields went dark. Somewhere out there, I pulled over and screamed into the steering wheel, not from rage, but from emptiness. It was the sound of someone realizing the person they loved had slowly erased them one secret at a time. And the worst part? I let her. I gave her every inch of rope she needed. All for the illusion that we were okay. All for the comfort of thinking I mattered. 3 weeks after I left the house, I returned for the first time. Not to stay, just to get the rest of my things. I texted her in advance, told her I'd come by in the afternoon while she was at work. I didn't want another confrontation. I didn't want apologies. I just wanted to gather the fragments of my old life, box them up, and carry them into whatever this new quiet version of existence was going to be. When I opened the front door, it creaked like it hadn't been used much. The place smelled different, less like her perfume, more like air fresheners and something faintly metallic, like dried wine on a countertop. There was a new rug in the entryway, something modern, something I wouldn't have chosen. I stepped around it like it didn't belong to me, because it didn't anymore. The living room was spotless. The coffee table had a stack of fashion magazines and one of those overpriced candles she used to say were too indulgent to buy. There were no pictures of us on the walls anymore, just generic art prints and a single black and white photo of a city skyline I didn't recognize. It hit me then. She wasn't just moving on emotionally. She was actively replacing the story we built. Room by room, I walked upstairs to the bedroom. It smelled like lavender and bleach. The bed was made crisp, precise, not the way she used to make it. This was clinical, like a hotel. My drawers were empty. My clothes were stacked in boxes against the far wall, labeled W. The labels were too neat, too prepared. She had been ready for this long before I ever sent that message at the restaurant. I knelt down beside the box and lifted the lid. Inside were my shirts, socks, even my old college hoodie she used to steal when she was cold. On top of the pile was a small folded note. I stared at it for a full minute before touching it. It wasn't handwritten. It was typed like a memo, one sentence. I hope someday you can forgive me, But I understand if you don't. That was it. No name, no signature, just a typed confession with no real weight, no heart, no effort. I put the note back and closed the box. In the hallway, I passed the office, her office. The door was slightly open. I don't know what pulled me toward it. Maybe habit. Maybe something else. I pushed the door wider and froze. On the desk was a framed photo, a selfie of her and a man I didn't recognize. He had sandy hair, big teeth, and his hand was on her shoulder. She looked happy, freer, lighter. In the background, I could see the inside of a cabin, maybe up in Vermont, where she always said she wanted to visit someday. I stepped closer and saw the corner of a printed itinerary poking out from under the frame. I picked it up. It was a weekend plan. Dinner reservations, hikes, a couple's massage. Dated 2 months ago, 2 months before she ever met Ian, the guy I caught her with at the restaurant. That name on the phone from the storage box, Denton, clicked into place. It was him. This had been going on longer than I even imagined. More than one affair, more than one secret, different men, different lives. None of them included me. I dropped the paper. My legs felt hollow. I leaned against the wall and slid down to the floor. I didn't cry. That was the worst part. I felt like I should have cried, screamed, thrown something. But all I felt was this cold, spreading emptiness. Like whatever part of me used to respond to pain had just given up. I sat there for 20 minutes, maybe more, staring at the baseboard, listening to the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway. Eventually, I stood up, grabbed my boxes, and left without locking the front door. I didn't care anymore. Let it stay open. Let the wind take whatever was left. It wasn't mine to protect anymore. The home we built had become a museum of illusions, and I wasn't the curator. I was just the final visitor walking through, reading the plaques, and saying goodbye to a life that never really existed the way I thought it did. A few days later, I got a call from my bank. They wanted to confirm a wire transfer request made in my name. My stomach tightened. I hadn't authorized anything. The request had been flagged because it was a larger amount than usual. $10,000. Destination: a personal checking account that didn't belong to me. I asked for the name on the recipient account. They said they couldn't provide that without an official investigation. That was all I needed to hear. I drove straight to the house. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just knew something was off, deeper than betrayal. I knocked, then let myself in with the key. I hadn't yet given up. She was home, sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, a cup of coffee in front of her, like everything was normal. When she saw me, her expression flickered just for a second. But it was enough. "We need to talk," I said flatly. "About what?" she replied almost too calmly. "The bank, the transfer. Don't play dumb." She didn't answer. Instead, she closed her laptop slowly, folded her hands, and stared at me. "You don't understand," she said quietly. "Then help me understand." She stood up, walked to the kitchen drawer near the sink, and pulled out an envelope. It was already sealed, already addressed to me. "I was going to leave this for you," she said. I opened it right there. Inside was a note and a printout of some sort of financial agreement. The note read, "This isn't about money. I just want what's fair. You'll be okay, Wallace. You always are." The agreement, it was a draft of a post-separation financial proposal. She wanted the savings, half the investment account, and access to shared discretionary funds for 6 more months. Shared discretionary funds. That's where the 10 grand came from. "You were going to take my money and just leave me a note?" I asked, my voice shaking. I thought it would be less painful than a long fight. That was the moment I realized something vital. She wasn't just done with me emotionally. She had been preparing to walk away clean with a plan, with assets, and without ever having to look back. This wasn't a mistake. This was a quiet execution. And I had been asleep at my own trial. I didn't yell. I just looked at her one last time and said, "You always knew how to leave without slamming the door." I guess I was too quiet to ever hear it close. Then I turned and walked out for the last time. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the parking lot of a diner with a cold cup of coffee in my hand, staring at my phone. I kept going over the envelope, the signature, the phrasing, the numbers. Something felt wrong, too confident, too specific. Then it hit me. She thought I wouldn't dig deeper. She forgot I work in system security, financial forensics. I've spent 15 years tracking data trails and catching internal fraud before it made the news. So, I started tracing not out of revenge, but out of instinct. I pulled up our shared financial platform and found backups of the transaction drafts. There were 3. One attempt failed because she'd used a mismatched routing number. The second was a test transfer, just $50 to the same destination. It had gone through. And the third, the one flagged by the bank, was only the final step. I downloaded everything, cross-referenced it with older statements. That's when I found a pattern. Withdrawals every 2 weeks for nearly 6 months. Different names, different memos, but the same destination path. I requested a formal audit. It triggered an alert. The next morning, I got a call from the fraud prevention team. We have reason to believe that funds from your joint account were being rerouted through a shell account, possibly created using your wife's credentials. I thanked them, hung up, and stared out the window of the hotel. This wasn't just infidelity anymore. This was calculated. It wasn't about loneliness or drifting apart. It was about control, about quietly building an exit strategy using my trust as currency. That realization didn't make me feel stronger. It made me feel used, like I was just a name on the paperwork she needed to access the life she wanted next. And the worst part? I'd handed her the PIN. The audit was completed a week later. The bank confirmed what I already suspected. She'd been slowly bleeding our joint accounts, funneling money into a separate profile under a fake name. One she created months before things even began to crack between us. I could have pressed charges. I could have gone nuclear, but I didn't. I wasn't interested in destroying her. I just didn't want her to destroy me. So I had my lawyer draw up terms. Simple ones. She would walk away with what she brought in. No more, no less, no spousal support, no future access, just clean lines, a reset. When she got the papers, she didn't fight. She signed them quietly, maybe even with relief. We didn't speak after that, not in person, not on the phone. And honestly, that was the best gift she could have given me. Silence. Months passed. I moved into a small house near the edge of town. It's not much, but it's mine. I bought furniture that actually matches. I started going for morning walks. Adopted a dog from the shelter. A quiet little beagle named Murphy who follows me like I'm the center of the universe. Funny how a creature that's been abandoned can still trust so easily. Maybe we're alike in that way. I started reading again. Things I used to love but had forgotten about. I signed up for a photography course at the community center, not because I'm good at it, but because it lets me see the world through a lens I control. There's peace in that. One morning, I stopped by a new coffee shop that had opened near my place. The barista recognized me from my visits and said, "You always seem calm, like someone who's been through something and made it out." I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled and replied, "Something like that." The truth is, I didn't come out of this stronger. I came out clearer, lighter. I'm not angry anymore, not bitter. I don't think about her every day. Some days I don't think about her at all. And when I do, it's not with rage or regret. It's with the quiet understanding that some storms are sent to clear a path, not to drown us. So, if you've made it this far and you're wondering what comes after betrayal, after silence, after everything, this is it. Stillness, healing, and eventually, something that looks a lot like peace.